At 2:17 a.m., on a quiet stretch of Route 64 outside Denton, Texas, Officer Mark Kelton flipped on his cruiser's lights and pulled up behind a faded blue Buick LeSabre swerving gently between lanes. He didn't expect much. Probably a tired driver, or drunk. But he couldn't ignore the taillight, or the lazy drifting. He radioed in the stop, stepped out, and approached. The car slowed to a crawl before finally pulling over. The driver rolled down her window. A woman in her late 20s, pale, jittery. Her black hair was matted to her face, and her hands trembled as she reached for her license. "Ma'am, do you know why I stopped you?" Officer Kelton asked, shining his flashlight into the car. She nodded quickly, her voice a whisper. "Taillight. Have you been drinking tonight?" "No. Just tired." Kelton scanned the interior, empty passenger seat, no sign of bottles or drugs. But something wasn't right. The air felt thick, like decay. He stepped back and motioned to the rear of the vehicle. "Pop the trunk for me, please." She hesitated. Her eyes darted to the rearview mirror, then back to him. I can't. It's jammed." "Try." Her hand went to the lever. A soft click. The trunk didn't open. Kelton nodded, now alert. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." She froze. He repeated it more firmly, hand hovering over his holster. Finally, she stepped out, shaking. Barefoot. Dirt on her ankles. Her oversized hoodie hung down to her knees. She looked like she just crawled out of the woods. Kelton called for backup, then walked to the trunk and tried it manually. It opened. And the smell hit him like a freight train. Inside were two bodies. One male, one female. Crumpled and twisted. Blood soaked into the fabric of a floral blanket. Their faces were swollen, barely recognizable. Duct tape was still clinging to the woman's mouth. The young woman on the side of the road dropped to her knees. The driver's name was Marla Jean Holloway, 28. A former nursing student who had dropped out 3 years earlier. No priors. No history of violence. Her car wasn't stolen. The bodies in the trunk weren't strangers. They were her adoptive parents, Leonard and Patricia Holloway. By the time Detective Elise Ramona arrived on scene at 3:09 a.m., Marla was already in cuffs, sobbing in the back of a cruiser. Elise had seen plenty of disturbing scenes, but this one stuck with her. The precision of the kills. The duct tape. The cold, late-hour drive with the bodies in the trunk. And yet the killer looked broken. When Elise entered the Denton police station at dawn, the interrogation room lights were low. Marla sat alone, her hoodie now replaced by a gray jumpsuit. Her wrists were red from the cuffs. A styrofoam cup of untouched coffee sat on the table. Elise entered quietly and took a seat. "Marla," she said calmly. "Let's talk." Marla didn't respond for a full minute. Then she muttered, "They weren't supposed to wake up." The autopsy revealed the Holloways had been drugged before being smothered with plastic wrap. No signs of a struggle. The drugs matched a vial of lorazepam found in Marla's purse. Strong sedative. Use for anxiety. Also known to induce compliance. "Why?" Elise asked her again during the second interview. Marla stared at the two-way mirror. "You ever feel like you were born wrong?" she whispered. "Like you're in the wrong life?" "I used to ask my mom. Patricia. I used to ask if I was adopted. She always said no." "But you were?" Marla nodded. "I found the papers in the attic. They got me when I was 5. From a private agency. My real name was Maeve Norwood. I had a brother. He died in foster care. They never told me. They took me like I was a pet. Like I was something to collect." Elise leaned forward. "Is that why you killed them?" Marla shook her head. "That's why I started planning." Detectives found journals in Marla's apartment. Dozens. Each filled with carefully drawn diagrams of her life. How she would erase it. How she would start over. A cabin she wanted to buy in northern Oregon under a new identity. A fake name already in progress, June Carter. A new social security card ordered from the dark web. A note. Need to practice being a widow. The most chilling page was a checklist. Sedate. Tape. Wrap. Drive. Dump. Disappear. The last box was unchecked. It took 2 more days before Elise learned that Marla had made practice runs. Surveillance from gas stations near Lake Ray Roberts showed her driving alone around midnight several nights in a row, parking, sitting, walking into the woods with black trash bags, returning empty-handed. At one location, officers found a partially buried box. Inside, 2 mannequins wrapped in plastic, duct tape over their faces, and fake blood. The motive wasn't just adoption secrecy. It went deeper. A forensic analyst recovered fragments from Marla's old cell phone. Deleted voicemails. One, in particular, changed the tone of the case. "Marla, this is your father. I know we fought, but you're not well. Please come home. You need help." That was Leonard. Sent 6 days before the murders. Another was more disturbing. A female voice. "If anyone finds out what happened to your brother, we'll all go to jail. It was an accident. But you can't talk about it. Ever." That voice matched Patricia. When Elise confronted Marla again, she finally broke. "They left him," Marla said, eyes hollow. "They said they couldn't handle 2. He was 8. I was 5. They said he screamed too much. Said he was broken. So they gave him back. He died 6 months later in a group home." Elise asked quietly. "Did you remember him?" Marla nodded. "Every day. But they told me he was imaginary." The case went to trial 6 months later. The prosecution painted Marla as a cold-blooded killer who meticulously planned the murder of the only people who raised her. They called her manipulative, dangerous, and deeply disturbed. The defense argued trauma, betrayal, and emotional neglect. They presented her journals, her discovery of the adoption, the loss of her brother. They argued diminished responsibility, not insanity, but emotional collapse. But the jury didn't see a broken woman. They saw the blood, the duct tape, the fake IDs, the bucket list. After 6 hours of deliberation, Marla Holloway was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Life without parole. But that wasn't the end. 6 months into her sentence at Gatesville Correctional Facility, Marla's case drew attention from a retired social worker named Evelyn Harper, who had worked at the now-defunct Red Creek foster system, the same one where Marla's brother had supposedly died. Evelyn contacted Detective Elise Ramona with shocking news. There were no records of a Maeve Norwood or a brother matching the details Marla described. No death certificate. No foster record. She offered a theory. "What if," Evelyn said, "her brother never existed?" Elise pulled the files again. The adoption was private, routed through a now-closed agency in Missouri. The paperwork was sketchy. Names redacted. Some forms signed only with initials. Elise drove 3 hours to the agency's old location. It was now a hardware store. The records were gone. Or so she thought. With a court order, she found archived microfilm records from the building's prior tenants. One adoption file stood out. A girl named Maeve. No last name. Placed from a group home after being found wandering in a cornfield at age 4. No sibling listed. Trauma-induced hallucinations weren't uncommon in abused children. Especially when young. Which meant, possibly, Marla had killed 2 people based on a lie her own mind invented. When Elise returned to Gatesville to visit Marla one last time, she brought the file. She laid it on the table. "There was no brother," she said. Marla didn't react. She stared at the wall. "You created him. Because you couldn't understand why your life felt wrong." Marla blinked slowly. "They erased me," she whispered. "So I erased them." The case became a media sensation. The girl who remembered a brother that never existed. Adoption, lies, and murder, the Trunk Killer of Denton. Victim or villain? The Holloway homicide debate. Psychiatrists debated her condition for years. Some labeled it dissociative identity disorder. Others believed it was trauma-induced delusion. But most agreed, her pain was real. What made Marla Holloway's case so haunting wasn't just the method of the crime. It was the possibility that her entire motive was based on a memory that never happened. She remains in solitary confinement. No visitors. No appeals. In a 2025 letter to a journalist, she wrote, "There's a grave in my head no one can find. But I visit it every night.